This is the typical theme of what happens a lot in IFS. Is there's one thing that's way too dangerous to feel, the exile, the black hole in this case, and we feel like we would die if we would allow that fully. And that's actually how our system feels. And then there is a protector part that works with disgust and shame and hatred, and it protects the black hole. And that's kind of like protects the intensity of it, protects you from dying.
In my experience, IFS is not necessarily healing the parts, so you're happy forever. You are healing the relationship patterns that you have with yourself. So when we look at the C's, calmness, curiosity, compassion, these are relational qualities. How it's the way I show up to a part that is coming up. And just like in trauma healing, its purpose is to create a space for the part that is so accepting, and so the parts feel so welcomed and so loved that it's relaxing, and it's releasing what it's called a burden.
So hello, welcome back to another episode of the Spiritual Bypassers podcast with myself, Ashley, Jannick, and Tim. Today, we're getting less jokey and more serious into talking about particular topics that really interest us, and we think you as well. We're talking about IFS and parts work for the majority of this episode, going into what it is, what are the different parts that come up, what's the process, and then at the end, a very special live parts work process on myself, where Jannick very, very smoothly guides me into meeting some of my exiled parts and finding some resolution in my body. And so you're going to be able to use these tools for yourself. Just stay tuned to the end, and we'll see you in the episode.
Did you hear that? What was that? Oh my God, it's a new episode of the Spiritual Bypassers podcast. I thought it was a ghost, but that's just modern technology. Welcome to another episode with Jannick. Peace. Ashley.
Cute.
An anime, cute anime face. And Tim. Double thumbs up. You might assume we have a Halloween themed podcast today. We kind of do. We kind of do. We're talking about IFS today, the internal family system, and IFS can get quite spooky, especially when you don't know nothing about subpersonalities, and people are just start talking about voices in your head, and you're like, are they crazy? But it's actually the opposite of crazy. You might feel you're possessed by a demon that is controlling you, but it's just an inner part looking for validation, for some love. And we're gonna, what's it called? Den Teufel austreiben. We're gonna drive
some
out
exorcism.
Exorcism. Yeah. That's it. Some exorcism exercise. So, IFS. Jannick, I think Jannick is the most skilled person in the room when it comes to IFS. He just was bragging about having done like 5 podcasts and talked to numerous people, and he's like the coolest guy on earth when it comes to parts work. So why don't you just give us a small introduction? What is IFS?
Yes, thank you, Tim. That's very polite of you, considering how much you know and have read about this kind of therapy. So I'm sure that with Ashley applying it in each and every one of her sessions, having a lot of practical knowledge, we are a fantastic group to talk about IFS today. And I'd love to give an introduction, and then all the things that I missed, of course, on purpose, I'll leave up to you, and you can kind of like complete the list so that we make sure that we don't leave out anything that's important for you guys, you listeners out there, to come out of this podcast and then maybe even be able to apply this with yourself, but also in conversations and maybe even in your relationships, because IFS is a great tool that you can use to, I always call it, work as a team, to work together. So you're kind of like, instead of confronting each other in conversations, you can allow yourself to become a team and look at different parts that are present within you or your partner. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with the intro. So IFS, Internal Family System, founded by Richard Schwartz, who is a family therapist. And at some point he realized, oh, the things that I do in family therapy and constellation work, somehow a lot of that I can apply to the human psyche as well. What does that mean? We are not one psyche that is like aligned and that is never contradicting each other. In fact, if you really look into our inside worlds, there's a lot of different parts. We even use that in our natural language. Sometimes we say, oh, a part of me feels really sad about this, or oh, a part of me is really excited, and it feels so natural. And the reason why is because it is a very, very phenomenal description and way to describe how our internal world and internal voices work. And there are some principles that are important to know. So first of all, there is the self. And the self is the part of us that's not a part. It's kind of if you compare it to, maybe you've heard of nervous system regulation and the different states that you can be in fight or flight mode, or you can be in more of a, like, what's the English term for that? Relaxed, regulated state, or you can be in some kind of more like a free state. So when you are connected to the self, you can say you feel really regulated and you are able to look at your parts without interfering with them, and you allow yourself for there to be different opinions present at the same time that apparently contradict each other. And this is such an important part and such an important goal of IFS as well, in at least in my opinion, is this ambiguity tolerance. You mature by allowing different seemingly contradicting perspectives to be true at the same time. And when you're connected to the self, you can look at yourself and at these voices that you have inside of yourself with compassion and curiosity. And yes, there are some other attributes that are connected to the self. They are called the 8 C's. I don't think I know all of them by heart, but maybe Tim, you do, or you can do some Googling and then you will know.
I have them.
Do you have them here? Okay.
Compassionate, clear, some of them.
Yes.
Calm, compassion, clarity. What else?
Curiosity.
No.
Curiosity. Creativity, courage, confidence, and connectedness. These are sort of you are connected to what Richard Schwartz called self when you embody one of these qualities. Again, calmness, curiosity, compassion, clarity, confidence, courage, creativity, and connectedness. And what I find interesting about that, it's not necessarily that you have to be super happy when you're connected to self. Like, it's not like you're a joyful ball of bliss. When I'm confronted with a part, for example, that is super angry and puts a lot of intensity to the table, it's to me, it's more like curiosity or courage that I connect with the self. It's like, whoa, I'm really gathering all of my courage to meet myself in that intensity. So it has a lot of different facets, and I find myself like just juggling around with these words and ask myself, can I allow myself to be calm, curious, and whatever C is resonating with you? And that usually connects me to self and calms me down.
Yes. And you can always ask yourself the question, how do I feel towards that part of me? And what that question does is it does something very important in parts work or in IFS, which is called unblending. So a lot of times we are identified with parts. That means we think we are those parts. So you're angry and you think all of me is angry about the situation. There's no part of me that's not angry. I'm just angry. And you say it, I'm angry. And then you can ask yourself, how do I feel towards that angry part? And all of a sudden, just with that question, you have to, in order to reply to that, unblend and disidentify with only that part and look at it from something else. And sometimes that can even, like, just that question can connect you to the self. And then you might say, I hate that part, actually. I hate to be angry all the time. Then you know that's another part, because you're not compassionate and curious about that angry part. You're like, oh, now I'm identified with another part that hates the angry part. All right, so there's two parts fighting with each other. And that's usually how every conflict that you can have in your life is being created, is two parts that don't like each other. And you are not seeing them from the self with compassion. You are seeing them from the perspective of one of those two parts.
I have a question, because I'm listening as if I would be someone who's like very new to this. Would the goal then be to never, at the end of the day, like all the parts are so calm and so chill that we just stay in that constant state of the 8 C's?
Yeah, so the goal is to stay connected to the 8 C's, but it's never about repression, or it's never about calming them down. That would be another part oftentimes that comes from emotional repression. Yeah, so a lot of times, especially, it's the Spiritual Bypassers podcast. So let's stick to bypassing. Bypassing happens through emotional repression, through I am not allowed to be angry. So another part comes in that says, don't be angry. And it works with shame, with the sensations of shame or guilt. And it's like convinced that it's right and it's here for a good purpose. And it's like, I'm here for connection. So please, angry part, shut up. Don't like get too loud. I should stay calm. Look, the IFS says it, we need to be calm and connected. So stop it. That's not fully allowing that part to express itself. That's just a repression, and you identified with another part. And another thing that's really important here is every part is here for you. So a big part of IFS it's a big principle, finding out about the gift, about the purpose of the parts that you have. It's always here for you. And that then allows you to find that gift, allows you to be more compassionate with yourself again. Because you realize, oh, I'm not angry just for fun or because I suck. I'm angry because this part is trying to fulfill a job for me. For example, it's protecting my boundaries. Or the other one that hates the angry part, it's not here because it sucks and it's just emotionally repressing. It's here because in the past, through holding back your anger, you were able to connect to other people. So this part has a gift as well. The gift might be connection or harmony. Yeah, so that's another big thing that you always try to do in IFS is, why is this part here? What is it giving me? What is it? It's gift for me.
And another thing that I can add to that is, in my experience, first of all, could become kind of a pitfall to say, I'm doing this to get somewhere, and I'm doing this to always be happy, because that's just naivete. In my experience, IFS is not necessarily healing the parts, so you're happy forever. You are healing the relationship patterns that you have with yourself. So when we look at the C's, calmness, curiosity, compassion, these are relational qualities. How it's the way I show up to a part that is coming up. And just like in trauma healing, its purpose is to create a space for the part that is so accepting, and so the parts feel so welcomed and so loved that it's relaxing, and it's releasing what it's called a burden, which is usually, Jannick, you can describe that probably way better than me, but the way I see a burden is, the part is, to put very simply, he's doing something he doesn't want to do. He has a job that he is not equipped to do, and that is stressing the part out. For example, for me, my inner, like a few child parts of mine have done my paperwork, and I was always so, so like overwhelmed with it, and asked myself, why am I so bad at doing paperwork? And then when I confronted myself and was meeting the situation with curiosity, I found out, wait a minute, that's a child. why would it, like, a child is not equipped to do paperwork? No wonder I'm confused and overwhelmed all the time, because this part is obviously doing something it doesn't want to do, and that's creating the tension. And in the welcoming, we can rebuild the relationship to that part. And usually what happens is the part will reveal that it doesn't like doing something. And also, because it's an autonomous entity, it sort of has its own story, it has its own thoughts, opinions, values, and is literally talking to you. And through that, it will reveal what it rather wants to do. For my child, it just wanted to play, like children should.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It can be that a burden is a role that it took on, or it can be a consequence. But a lot of times it doesn't necessarily have to be. It can also just be an old pain or just an unprocessed emotion that was never safe enough to be felt, that this little child part still holds. And then because of that, it takes on a role that it doesn't want to. It can be, but doesn't necessarily have to be like that. It can just be that you meet this child and there's rage because it was never safe enough to feel that rage. And that's the burden that this little child or that part of you took on. And then what needs to happen is not always that they find a new role. Oftentimes that happens after they've released the pain. They're like, hey, would you like to do something else now? And yes, a lot of times actually, for some people, this might be really crazy. Maybe we should acknowledge that it's, you can talk to your parts, and we are acting as if that's normal. You can communicate with your inside world. Yeah, you can be like, oh, there's anger. I am not that anger. That's the first step. But now we skip the second step, which is you can be in contact with that anger from a different place. So you are basically talking to yourself. That's why Tim said in the beginning, it might be a bit spooky because you're like, why can I trust the answers of that, right? I'm like, because a lot of times, and we'll go through that later, you enter a part and you find a part through somatic experiences in the body. So, for example, a contraction in your chest might be the entrance point to connect to that part, or in your throat or in your belly. These are common entry points. And then you allow yourself to see this as a part, and then you can ask questions. And you can be like, okay, first of all, you connect to it. So you might describe the sensation, you might allow it to become bigger. It's always nice to come into a calm state of the nervous system and of the consciousness. So breathing in the beginning helps, or doing a little meditation. So you become a little more intuitive and get out of your mind. But then you are able to communicate, and answers will come. And you can trust that they make sense, even though in the beginning it might feel really weird because you're asking yourself, where does this come from? You ask the part, what are you angry about? Does it have to do with your father? No. Does it have to do with your mother? All of a sudden, spikes in your body, and you're like, yes. And you're like, whoa, I didn't know this had to do with my father. I had no idea. But your body and this part told you. So yeah, I just wanted to take a few minutes to acknowledge that this is actually possible, and we do it in the sessions, and it's a really powerful tool. And yes, then that way you can process these emotions that might have not been able to be felt before, and that can also be a part of the unburdening process. Just wanted to add that.
So question. I feel like I'm the devil's advocate today, guys, because it's
Yes.
Halloween. So last Friday was at a house party, and I was with like very normal people, like not in this field. Like I was talking for a long time.
Muggles.
Muggles. So I was talking for a long time with a doctor. There's another part of that that's going to be a story I'll bring later, because actually it turns out he's doing very similar work to what we're doing. He just doesn't realize it. But when you said, Jannick, just then, like, yeah, so like if you ask that question, then you can trust the answer. But like people like him were like super skeptical that even if they got the tingles when the question came about it being about mom, the very rational people still are like, yeah, like I still don't trust the answer that comes from it as well. So I don't really have a question. I'm just bringing in that there's a lot of skepticism. Also, for a lot of people, when I'm talking about the sessions that we give for emotional release, that some people don't really fully trust that what comes up is actually real. I mean, we can never fully trust that. I remember my main ex would always critique that. He's like, yeah, it's just convenient that that's the answers that came up, or like convenient that those parts explain like certain behaviors that happen to have come up in a session that like conveniently explain why you did certain things. So yeah, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on people who are maybe very skeptical about this as well.
I do. I would say that if a part, for example, is voicing that this is about mom, it doesn't necessarily have to be that it's about your literal mom, and here's something has it could also in most cases, it usually is. The point is more to build a relationship and to get curious. So if a part says, this is about mom and I feel this and that, it's not like, oh, this is mom and I completed my analysis and I understood the whole thing. It's more becoming curious about how the part is feeling. And you can ask the part as well, what is your story? Like, do you have, you're saying that, the root cause of your suffering is mom or is something to do with your mother and your family. Can you just expand on that? Like, what happened? And you can allow yourself to become curious there. And another point that I have, because IFS is very similar to Jungian approaches like active imagination. And what's the case with active imagination? It's basically saying that these that our fantasy and that the thoughts that are produced also in a parts work session are something like a continuation of a dream. It's like this, the same mechanism that is producing dream images at night is producing fantasy images during the day. And because these images and these answers, just like Jannick said, are arising from the unconscious, they have some meaning. They mean something. And I'm really convinced that they do. And the task of whoever is doing the session is to connect with self and to understand and decipher the meaning. And sometimes it's not about mom. It may be about the archetypal mother that is, responsible for nurturing you. It can be, it doesn't have to be like literal. It can also be symbolic. That is, a bit of a word salad, especially for people who are skeptic. But I would say even for a skeptic, it's like, just lass dich ein, just ease into it, just try it, and just act like for 20, 30 minutes as if it was true and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to add to that there is this principle of there not being a right or wrong way. We need to let go of that in the beginning of the session. There is no right answer and wrong answer. This is a very one-sided way of looking at this. And this is where they create their arguments from. It's like, oh, there's a right answer, it's about mom, and there's a wrong answer, it's about dad. No, like Tim said, there is a reason why in this moment you came up with this answer of your mom. And we are going to be curious and see what that means and why that happens. And maybe later on it's about dad, even though you said in the first place you said mom, but there was a reason why you said mom, because you wanted to protect your dad, because whatever. And then you meet that part that's protecting your dad and said it's about the mom, like just as an example. And another thing that's so important is your body tells the truth. And so you can sense in your body if something was right, if something was the truth that you expressed or not. If you feel absolutely nothing, and it's just like a mental answer that you came up with, like a story, you will feel, you'll not feel much. But if actually something unconscious is being brought to the surface of consciousness and there's light being shined on this part, and this previously unconscious part, you can sense it in your body. Like a shift happens. It's like a oof, like a whoa, where did this come from? Like, oh, this feels true. And yes, this sensor is oftentimes not really trained in people who don't do this much, but the more you do it, the more you train this kind of muscle, and the more you can sense it through, we call it through resonance. So there's like a resonance happening in your body.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these like a lot of the people I met at this party are sensors. They're not used to going into the inner world, or they're just not curious about the inner world. Like their world is happening on the outside with practical sensation things that they can see, they can measure, they can practically see with their senses. Doesn't mean either is right or wrong. It's just like very different types of humans, and we all resonate with different things. What I wanted to add is that person is like now a company doctor, which is like the person who like goes into different companies and people come to them for like prescriptions. So I was like, oh, like what kind of things are you treating mostly? I was making like a bit of a joke, like, oh, haha, hemorrhoids or something. And it's like, no, like it's mostly like stress. It's mostly people having burnout. And I was like, oh, interesting. Like, what are you doing for treatments for that? And he was like, yeah, I'm normally like the first point of call they come to. And sometimes it's about medication, but sometimes it's just about being a listening ear. And I was like, oh, interesting. So even though you're like a trained medical doctor, like you're actually being more of like a psychologist. And it's like, no, like I actually just send people more to, I guess, people like you to do their emotional work. But I asked him like, do you feel like you're making a difference with the tools and things that you have at hand? And he was a bit like, yeah, definitely. But I was like, how do you measure that? He's like, well, they don't come back. I'm like, well, I don't know if that's measurement or not, but it was interesting to have a glimpse into like the healthcare system in Holland as well. Having been on the recipient side of it, both from a company doctor and from the normal doctors who just Google your symptoms in front of you and give you paracetamol.
Yeah.
Nice.
I love that.
But he appreciated that joke. I was like, it's not a joke. Trauma from Dutch doctors.
maybe to get a bit more clarity on the topic, and maybe to feed the skeptics with a bit more information, we can talk about the different parts there are, like the different categories. We talked about the self already. And there's actually 3 more types of parts. Like the self is technically not a part in that, in that nature, but there's 3 more. One is managers. They prevent pain and maintain control, and they manage daily life. These are parts that are, in my experience, and from what I know, parts that manage which parts are allowed to come up and which parts are better off being suppressed. Is that true, Jannick? How would you describe that?
Yeah, they are being like categorized as protector parts. And there's another kind of protector parts, but managers are one kind of protector parts. So they protect you from something. What do they protect you from? Some things that are not safe to be seen or felt at the moment. And they're active a lot. They're active all the time. And a typical example for a manager part would be an inner critic. An inner critic that's active all the time, that tells you like, you're not doing this right, you should do this better. And it works with the feelings of shame a lot. And again, you can immediately see the gift in that, right? You do things really well. At least this is the strategy of that part. And one thing I'd like to add is, before we look at the other parts, a lot of times you will recognize childish strategies in these parts. You're still acting out childish, or not childish, but children-made strategies today. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to talk yourself down all the time if you just look at it from a rational perspective and be like criticizing yourself all the time. It doesn't really make a lot of sense if you could choose. So somehow you're probably not able to choose. And that is because this part that criticizes you a lot, this manager part, is still stuck in the past. It still thinks it's dangerous not to do that, and it still thinks it needs to be perfect in order to for mom or dad to love you. These are the things that are like behind the logic of these kind of parts, why they act in the way they do. And you can apply this, that's why I'm saying it in advance, to all of the parts that Tim will introduce in a moment. And so yes, I think that gives an overview of what manager parts are.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the dumb one asking questions today. So the manager one, is that the one that essentially is allowing coping mechanisms to be there, or is this a different part? Like if you,
it's coping.
Instead of sitting down to meditate, you go on Instagram Reels because you don't want to go inwards, that kind of thing.
Yes,
They're
exactly.
like, order of the day. Addiction. Avoidance.
Yes,
I would say that I would say that both firefighters, which we will talk about in a minute, and manager parts both are triggering coping mechanisms. It's just that manager parts are more trying to prevent something. They prevent, it's you can almost imagine that a manager is shielding, is exhibiting behavior that is shielding from a vulnerable part of yourself being shown or being exposed to something he is seeing as threatening. For example, overworking or perfectionism or controlling behaviors can all be ways of, yeah, I'm working a lot. I'm working a lot, so I don't have to feel my inner worthlessness. And there's a small part inside of me that I'm not willing to let out because it's way too dangerous for him. So I'm covering that up with perfectionism and controlling behavior, or I'm working a lot, so I don't have to feel that worthlessness. And then when the worthlessness is about to be triggered, that's when firefighters come up and you feel your nervous system in a state of dysregulation. And what then happens, oh fuck, I'm dysregulated. What am I doing? You might take drugs to soothe yourself. You might take like a 3-hour doom scrolling session on Instagram. You do all of, or you binge eat, or you binge watch series. You do whatever to not feel the pain that is already surfaced. It's like a firefighter trying to put off a fire that has been emerged. That's sort of the difference. Managers are preventing, and firefighters are trying to put off somatic internal fires that have been triggered.
Yeah, like a last resort. Like, oh, it's too late. Now let's deal with the damage. Kind of, that's the firefighter.
And what's the difference with protectors then? Because I actually only really understand the concept of like the child paths and the protectors. How are they different to managers?
Managers are protectors. It's a category of protectors. Both firefighters and managers are protectors. And that's why it's true to say what you just said, that they are coping. I mean, coping is kind of managing. It's like avoiding or shielding or finding any way to deal with that except for feeling it.
So protector is sort of the overarching name for both managers and firefighters.
I have a very funny image from my corporate life. Like every morning in a corporate office, you have like a stand-up meeting where everyone comes together for like 5-10 minutes to check in and like what the plan is for the day. And I'm just picturing all the manager of all the parts. It's like, right, today we do not want to feel this, so we're going to be doing this.
Exactly. Remember, anger, no go. And then there's a scene of anger sitting in a cage and being like, meh, why?
And there's like days since last vulnerability. It's like 80. It's like, yes, we want to keep this up. Like at 81.
Yes, and that makes total sense, because just like that's the third category, the exile. Let's stick with that little image that Ashley brought up. There's this angry part who's not allowed to come up in that meeting, and the manager is saying, you stay in there. And obviously he's not like, yeah, can you please maybe stay in there? No, the manager part has to display a certain hostility against the exile part to make sure he's not coming up. And it's very like once the part is like approaching, it's like, no, I can't be fucking angry. No, that's not allowed. And there's like a also a tension that is displaying then somatically. It's like a build-up, and the manager is doing all he can to press this down, and he has to have a certain aggression to him in order to do that. That's why inner criticism is it's a coping mechanism, and it's it's usually can get pretty hostile, and pretty
That's true.
aggressive.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's important not to make any part the evil one, because they are not. If you talk to this manager part, they will tell you why they're doing this. And they will tell you, I am doing my best for Tim here, all right? Remember in sixth grade when Tim got angry and then everyone laughed at him and they didn't want to play with him for a whole month? I will never allow this to happen again. Never, never,
Okay.
never, never. So it's like, and then you immediately you create compassion to that manager part, because you're like, oh yeah, I mean, he's here for Tim. That manager part is
Yeah,
here for him.
he's doing his best. He's like working a 9 to 5. He's got a family
Yes,
of 3 at home to feed. Like it's
exactly.
subordinates who don't listen to him. Like it's a struggle. Like I
And
can really
he's
empathize with
convinced,
the
exactly, and
manager.
he's convinced this is what he has to do. It's not easy for him. It's like, do you think I like my job? Do you think I like using all these naughty words on this anger part and hold him back all day? I would like to let him out, but I can't, because I have a higher purpose, which is connection. Okay, we need to feel safe and connected to the outside world.
So 2 questions. What does the manager really want to do, aside from the protecting? And also, are there ever instances how does this anger get out of the cage sometimes? Like how does it ever manage to escape past the manager, or is it only through Gandalf, like you shall not pass, that's how the anger can come out?
Yeah. Question
I'm
number
loving all
one.
the imagery in this
Yes.
podcast. My brain loves this.
Question number one, it wants to do things that are not motivated from fear, shame, guilt, repression. It wants to do things that are motivated from a place of love and excitement. So you are excited about something, and these manager parts, they have a lot of energy, and they want to help you achieve your dreams, your goals. They want to, maybe they want to be artists, or maybe they want to have wonderful conversations and bring up brilliant arguments or write something or whatever it is. They want to really help you thrive. But sometimes they need to prevent you from, feeling guilty or ashamed or fearful. So it's not more like coming from this negative place. And to answer your second questions, yes, sometimes when something is really triggering, this trigger gets past the protector, the manager, and then this other part comes in, this like firefighter. It's like, I need to manage the situation somehow, and that firefighter might react differently. You can probably you can remember a conversation where you're talking to someone and then you're saying, but come on, what's really going on inside of you? Like, let's put aside all the bullshit and all your explanation, all these stories. What's really going on? And then for a moment, you can see in their eyes they want to cry or
They
something, and
feel
then
gaslit.
and then boom, like there's this moment of, oh, now we could get to the vulnerable part, but boom, no. And then all of a sudden they're like, what the fuck? You tell me I'm saying, I'm not true with my stories are not true. Like, fuck off. Who are you to tell me this? And the firefighter is getting like really angry to protect that vulnerable child again. And then that's the firefighter. It's like the second stage, like the security mechanism.
Can illustrate that, for example, with when I'm reading. Reading is really boring. Like, let's be honest. I like reading is just
Depends,
just a
right?
task that is there's not a lot of dopamine action going on within me. I would say 70% of the time when I read. So
Depends what you're
when
reading.
I'm
If it's
Yeah.
like a little bit of erotic fantasy, fairy fiction,
well, let's be honest, I said 70%, didn't talk about the other 30. Um, um, when I'm in this 70% zone and I'm like, okay, this is, I'm not taught, I'm not tortured, but it's just there's a child part in me, for example, that is like, this is boring. I want to play. I want to do this and I want to do this. And that is like, oh, let me grab my phone. And no, he's trying to distract me in like all the possible ways. And like I'm appreciating my manager part in that moment because he's like, I'm talking to the child and I'm saying, okay, if you want to play, we'll read for 1 or 2 more hours or like 15 minutes, depending on how pressing it is. and we'll go to a friend and play some Xbox afterwards or some ping pong or whatever, and then it's okay. Will that work for you? Yes, it would work. And usually in the background, then my manager part is still, not arguing, but he's keeping the inner child from taking over completely. He's making sure that I can read, or the part of me that wants to read is having its peace and is not constantly distracted and disturbed by the demands of my inner child.
Mm. Yeah.
Or is like it's sort of maybe it's also a self-like part. Maybe you can speak on that as well. Because when I talk to this inner child, I'm connected to self, but also kind of having the role of a manager. Maybe I'm also, what comes to the surface then is a part that behaves like the self, but is not the self. Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yeah, it's very common as you advance in this work that managers become really clever and they know exactly how self, should react. And then they tell stories from the self. And at the same time, what they are still trying to do is repressing emotions and not allowing a certain degree of vulnerability or anger or joy or whatever it is they are trying to protect. But they come in disguise as a really compassionate, understanding father figure. And it's already like great. It creates probably less suffering and issue and conflict in your system and less stress. But yeah, then it's more subtle to find out about this as well and meet that part again from self and be like, hey, you're doing a great job as well, and you're trying to be loving, but like it's not full compassion, full acceptance of the parts yet. You're still managing from a place of I have to.
Yeah.
Can I share a spooky epiphany that's like landing in the last like 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Halloween.
I think ever since we touched, even right at the start, on the 8 C's, I realized that probably 80% of my day I'm like blended with a part.
Yeah.
Boom. Yeah.
And that's fucking scary.
It's scary and kind of good because once you know, you can't unsee it. And that's the doorway. You're like, you've gone through the door already.
Yeah, like this conversation, like I've known about parts work for 2 years, but there's always like so much you can cognitively understand, and then at some point, like things land more in your being, in the cells. And this moment, I'm just like, some part of me is like, like having a bit of an existential crisis inside of myself right now. Because I was like listening to you both, and I was like, am I feeling calm, open-hearted, clear, like all of those things right now? And I was like, definitely not. There's like so much bubbling up around inside. And it was like great. And I was like, fuck, I'm like in a part right now.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
And what you're doing right now is called unblending. You're describing the part. You're like, oh, there is bubbling going inside of me. And yeah, exactly. The moment you talk about it, like, this is a life example of unblending. You're already more relaxed. You're already more like, oh yeah, there's this part of me. And it's not about
like have to laugh a lot.
Yeah, that's the thing. Now you're in your lightness even more, because it's like it's never about this bubbling having to go away. That's the beautiful thing. In order for you to be connected to self, the bubbling doesn't need to go away. It's just the recognition of that part that feels bubbly right now. And now we can ask it, it can focus on it. We can ask things. We can be like, why are you here? What are you protecting? All of that. And I think in a moment, after we've talked about the third category of parts, we could go into a process, because I have a document here as well with the exact steps of the IFS, and we can apply it here in the podcast, but we can also kind of like give it to you as a tool to work with yourself. That's the amazing thing about parts work. You can do it with yourself, with your partner, with your friends, whenever, wherever, once you have the skills.
Yeah, I also want to take a moment to honor that moment, because that's pretty, like, that's a pretty solid insight, actually. Like, it might sound weird, but it's like, this is also, to emphasize the whole thing that we're talking right now. This has the potential to be like literally life-saving and literally life-changing. Like, to me, my complete worldview and how I view myself, how I treat myself, how I make decisions, how I treat other people, has completely shifted once I really started to take this seriously. And as Jannick said in the beginning, the other life-changing epiphany is that these parts are literally autonomous. You can talk to them, and you should talk to them as if they were people. You should respect and honor their answers, just like you would respect answers from one of your friends or whoever you meet on the street, like literal personalities. And this is really, really powerful stuff. And it may sound very technical with all the categories and whatnot, but actually once you saw where the words are pointing towards, you cannot unsee it. It's so incredibly potent.
Yeah. And it creates this feeling of, oh, nothing needs to change. It's never about changing anything. It's just about kind of like zooming out and seeing what's there. And then, another, like what usually happens when you unblend is immediately a new part comes in and be like, wait, I can't just be relaxed. Wait, stop, what's happening? No. And then you see that as a part as well and be like, okay, I don't feel this part doesn't feel comfortable with me being relaxed. All right, something scary. This part must believe that there's something scary about relaxing. All right, probably that's preventing me from feeling relaxed all the time because I have a part inside of me that doesn't want to feel relaxed. So great, another great insight. So yeah, it's beautiful. But yeah, let's go into the process of like meeting this part maybe in just a moment. But before, I think we have to talk about the third category. Ashley, what did you want to say?
No, that we still had one more.
Yeah. So
Ashley is a good student. But Mr. Jannick, we have one more part to go.
You forgot about the homework. Right. You said we had homework. I'm like, shut up.
You get an extra star, Miss Frost. Good work.
Yes.
So we talk about
good girl kink.
Nice. So the good girl kink. I don't know what bridge to build to the third part with that, but I'm just gonna go with exiles. Parts that hold past traumas, painful memories, and vulnerable emotions that are sort of swept under the rug, stored away. In my personal experience, I often find them in childhood rooms that have been locked, and I open the door in my active imagination. They are often in cages. All of these are symbols for actually, they are in our subconscious, and they are living somewhere where they are not in my conscious perception. Like they are sort of doing their thing, and there's obviously the managers and the firefighters in relationship to them, but it's really the part of us we have disowned, things that we told ourselves we shouldn't feel that, and it's not safe to feel that, and you're better off in that cage. And usually this is like, in my experience, this is these parts are, almost all of them are defined by a high degree of innocence. They are very small. They didn't do anything wrong, and they've been just in that kick. It almost like a bit emotional talking about that, because they never wanted to hurt anyone. And imagine a small child. I had an incredible active imagination journey where I found this inner child in a cave, and I approached the inner child, and it was wearing a white, what is it, like a white linen cloth, and it was dirty. And I asked the child, what's your story? Why are you wearing this dirty cloth? And it said something like, I got spat on, and I was made dirty so often that I believed that the dirt that is on my cloth was me. I started to identify with the cloth. And then, when I listened to it, all of these things happened. And, this is more the Jungian approach, but then a whole array of knights came into the cave and rescued the inner child. And, the knight was taking it on the horse and got the inner child like a new white piece of cloth. And then there was like a cool sword in like a pool, and the child took that sword, and it can get really epic, but it's usually about rescuing these parts. Like they are exiled, they are banned from the kingdom of your consciousness. And the hero's journey is to go into these depths with, equipped with the C's, with curiosity, with courage and compassion, all of these things, and bring the part back into your consciousness where they can actually just live and unfold whatever wisdom they carry. It's usually not only a trauma or something like a painful memory that was suppressed. Oftentimes, it's also a quality or something that we're good at, something that we value, or some activity that wants to be reintroduced, or a way of relating that is also stored away. So we're not only storing away traumas and quote unquote the challenging, the bad stuff. It's also our golden shadow that is repressed. And then it gets not only just about, going into the darkness, but in the darkness, there's also beings of light that want to be rescued.
Yeah,
I love that.
I love that.
That was my speech
Can I
of the
add
day.
in something?
Yeah,
Or Jannick,
go ahead.
go. Mine's more going to a practical thing. So if it's a theory thing, then you can go first.
Yeah, it's a theory thing. So I love what you said there about the innocence. I think that should be, it's not, but it should be a part of IFS and of parts work is because parts work is non-pathologizing. There's nothing wrong with you. It always says that there's nothing wrong with you. The self, yeah, we've got to say that in the beginning. Everyone has access to the self. No matter how broken you think you are, the self is there. There hasn't been a single case where you couldn't find the self. Some people have a easier connection to the self than others, but it's there in each and every one of us. It's indestructible. It's always there, and you can connect to it, and it's your healing power within you. And the second part is this innocence. It's so important because, again, if you look at this part from a viewpoint of you are innocent, all of your parts are innocent, all of your strategies, everything you do and everything every human does is always an innocent strategy to deal with something that you think is too dangerous to feel, is not safe enough to feel. It's always an innocent strategy. And that already creates so much compassion. That's why innocence and compassion are so closely related. And about the Jungian perspective that you mentioned, yes, it's true that this active imagination is coming from the Jungian style, but at the same time, rituals are part of IFS as well. You use rituals, active imagination, throwing something into the fire or into the water, or digging a hole and putting it in there, whatever it is, giving it back to Mother Earth. All these kind of rituals are a part of IFS as well. So we will go into that in a moment, I guess. So yeah, Ashley, you wanted to add something?
It's a nice caveat into my point, actually. There's a common thing I notice when there's a lot of things are meditation focused or like inward processing focused that's still very much in the head or in the mind, that sometimes also like what Tim was describing with like the child and the nights, and it's like people also with very active imaginations, it can feel like so much is happening and like really the resolution is not coming. That was at least my experience a lot doing active imagination, because it's just so much going on that I didn't feel the full completion. And then this is where like the next step is of like actually getting the body involved with that. So for example, and doesn't have to be in a session, this could also be like in your room, if you were that person imagining and then there's the night coming, it's like, how would it feel to like wield your sword with your hands and like be slicing through something to go like and pick up a pillow that's like the little child and put it on your lap and like imagine riding a horse out or something like this, to actually get the somatic imprint of your body thinking that it's actually happening. Because we know like our mind is very powerful. We can manifest things just through visualizing, and actually then like the senses getting involved brings up more of a connection between that, and then actually the resolution is way faster. So if you're maybe someone who struggles with meditating or struggles with really grasping the full experience inside your head, like how can you bring it more to life? And also you're moving through the shame boundary then of like stood in your room pretending to be a knight riding a pillow or something. Like
Yes.
there's so many like deeper nuances to tap into there as well. And that's what I do in sessions. Like you can, of course, say, yes, imagine that you are pushing this door down, but how would it be if like you put your hands up and me as the client, the facilitator is pushing on your hands and really giving you resistance. So you really physically have to push against something to move through that boundary. And of course, you can be in a session and someone can help you with that. You can do that with your friends, but you can also just do it yourself, like pushing against a wall, pushing against something on the floor, doing a push-up. So again, taking back your autonomy, that you don't need to be in a paid session with someone to have this kind of insights and clarity come through.
Yeah, I love that. The power of rituals and ceremonies and like little acts,
Embodiment.
symbolism and embodiment. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. The voice, the face, your body, the breath. Radical soma, as David Bedrick calls it.
Radical.
Why is it radical? It's just what we're born with, but somehow it's become radical.
That's actually an important point, is to always involve the body. In fact, most of the entry points to doing a parts work session, either with yourself or with a licensed facilitator, whatever, is the body, is something in your body, and you focus on it, just like an emotional release. And you make what an emotional release we call a conversion. You convert it into a part, or the feeling, and your imagination almost does it by itself. And the way I stay grounded in my body, I will pendulate between the image and between the part speaking to me and the emotion. And it's very energetic and hard to describe, but they are in relationship. And when the part says something that is some sort of truth or some sort of relief or has some sort of grip and energy, usually the body also responds. And it's a chicken and egg kind of thing. I don't know what came first, but I agree with Ashley that the body has to be involved, because that's also a danger, specifically with active imagination, is that it can get, these imaginal realms can in fact take you over. And it's good to be cautious and mindful about grounding when you do these exercises. Not so much with IFS, but definitely with active imagination.
Yeah, and it can feel really safe. Like Ashley said, there's not much shame involved, a little bit shame involved in meeting that part in your mind. But if it feels really safe all the time, it's usually not a lot happening. Usually things are shifting and happening when you go through a shame or a fear or a guilt barrier.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, so let's go into the exact steps of the IFS. And one of the things, actually, the first step we already kind of did when Ashley mentioned about her realization, it's finding the part, like identifying the part. First of all, of course, that must be the first step. And by the way, Richard Schwartz seemed to love systems where you use the same letter a lot. So the 8 C's. Now we are with the 5 F's. I think it's the 5 F's now, which is the first part of the process. And these, just to mention them before we go into them in more detail, is finding the part, then focusing on the part. Then he calls it fleshing out, because he needed to find something with an F. It's learning more about the part in a way. It's kind of like investigating, I'd probably call it. Then feel towards. So that's related to the question I mentioned earlier. It's how do you feel towards that part? And what that does is a natural unblending. You look from self. You're like, I can only feel toward that part if I'm not the part. If I'm totally identified with it, I cannot feel anything towards it. It's like, what do you mean? What do I feel towards it? I'm angry. What do I feel towards the angry part? I'm angry. So then as a facilitator, as a therapist, okay, that person is blended. It's identified with the angry part. Then the last, or the second but last step is to befriend. So learning more about the part and establishing a good relationship with it, between the self and the part. So that is bringing in more compassion, understanding more. And the last one is the fears. So we are asking this part about their fears. What would happen if you stopped doing what you're doing, for example? This is a question to get into the fear. And yeah, we were just discussing, should we do a little live demo of what I just mentioned?
I'm open to it.
Yeah.
Ashley,
Okay.
Ashley.
So we're doing a short version of it because sometimes these sessions can be long and we don't know how long it will be. So it'll be a demo setting. So Ashley knows that. That's why in a real session this might take a lot longer, but we still want to go through the process of this. And after these Fs, after we've investigated these Fs, after we've investigated what I just mentioned, comes the second part of the IFS process, which is then actually the unburdening process, which means this is all the protector part, coming in touch with the protector. And underneath that lays the thing that the protector protects, which is the burdened part, the exile. And there is another process on how to unburden that, but that is advanced work. And that can get emotional. We'd hold proper space for that. It's not ideal to do that in a podcast setting. A lot of safety is necessary and a lot of vulnerability is necessary to do that. So yeah, maybe we can talk about it in another episode or like briefly afterwards. But yeah, for now we are with the 6 Fs. It's not 5 Fs, it's actually 6 Fs. And those are the ones that I just mentioned. So to begin, I would invite Ashley to just take a few deep breaths in through the nose into her belly, make herself feel comfortable in her body, really dropping consciousness into her body from the mind that is very active in podcast situations or in general in our life.
And for everyone listening, you can just join this exercise if you want.
Yeah. And then we'd ask for Ashley to find that part. So we could ask a question like, what part of you needs attention today? Is there anything present in your body? And in emotional release, we have a very somatic approach. So we would probably ask for contractions in the body. In typical IFS, it can also be just a voice in your head that's very active right now that you might want to work with. So
It's very somatic at the moment. I'm just having most of the day, a lot of heaviness, tightness on my chest area. For the past 2 weeks, I've 1 or 2 times a day getting like a heart palpitation and like the heart fluttering. That's an easier way to explain it. So although my mind is very, very active the past days, like there's just a lot of like anxiety going on in my chest, mostly. Like I feel it in a lot of my body, but here in particular, like lower throat, upper chest area, it feels very tense and yeah, like I can't take a full breath.
Yeah, so it feels tense in her throat and chest area. And it's great for her to describe that. That already creates some distance. And then I would invite Ashley to allow this sensation to be there in her chest. Maybe even allow herself to breathe into it. Imagining it to expand, welcoming it. And of course, in a real session, we would take more time for that. But since Ashley is also very skillful, she also can do these kind of things more quickly than someone who has never worked with this before could. And then the second part, which we already kind of did, was focusing on it by describing it, but also by expanding it. We can also say running towards it, because usually we always run away from contractions and those feelings, but now we want to run towards it. We want to focus on it. And then the third part is flashing out, deepening the access to that part. Can you ask this to give you some space? Can you ask this part to give you some space so that we can investigate it?
It's a little difficult. I'm quite a visual person, so I'm almost visualizing like a black, like black hole, like but like a almost like a tornado. It's like in the center of my chest and it's going like into my body.
Yeah.
It's really hard to have distance from it. It's like this vortex right
Yeah.
in the middle of the chest. And it feels like fear and hope, helplessness as well.
Yes. Okay, so there's fear and hopelessness, and there's a kind of like a black hole or black tornado in the middle of her chest. And already by me mirroring her, I give her permission to feel that. So that's why mirroring is a very powerful tool as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. So if Ashley tells me I can't distance from this at the moment or it's hard, then we just ask, can it be okay that it's hard right now? Can we allow that it's really difficult right now to take distance? That's fine as well. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah, like I would rather it wasn't there. So I'm also resisting it.
Yeah. And that's again saying yes to reality, saying yes to what is. She doesn't like it. Yeah. So that means we as facilitators know there is a part active right now that doesn't want this to be there. And there is this black hole present. And that's why step 4 is so important. It's now we have two parts, right? We have the one resisting and we have the black hole. So we could ask first, what do you feel towards that black hole being there?
Almost hatred.
Mm-hmm.
Like disgust as well,
Yeah.
because it's so dark and so like heavy, and it's like something I also have received criticism from on the external world of sometimes being very intense or melancholic or like heavy energy at times. So it's like getting that double shame from outside, and now I also shame it for being here.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So now there's shame, and shame is usually the energy of these kind of like avoidance. Yeah, shame is an energy of avoidance. We don't want it. It should not be there. It should go away. And now as facilitators, we know she's not having a lot of compassion present for this part. There is hatred and there's disgust. So now we know there's two parts. There's the black hole and there's the one that finds it disgusting and hates this kind of part. And now what we would do is we would turn to that part that says, I hate it and it's disgusting. And that part already spoke just now because it's saying, yeah, I received a lot of shame for this. So now we can ask Ashley again, what do you feel towards that part that hates the black hole part? What do you feel towards that one that finds it disgusting?
It's a little hard to connect with it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So there is a part that says right now, this black hole shouldn't be there. It's disgusting. I hate it. And I received so much shame for it in the past, and I'm shaming it.
I agree with it.
Okay, she agrees with it. Now, this is a sign that she is that part right now. She's blended with that part right now because she agrees. That's a great information for us. And now saying that out loud, Ashley notices it as well. And now I can tell her, okay, now I feel in my body that a shift happened in Ashley just now. She recognized it. And now I can tell her, okay, is there a part that can feel compassion or that doesn't agree to the hatred and to the disgust? Is there another part present inside of you?
I feel very, very blended with the angry, hateful one. And
Yeah.
it feels almost like if I would detach from it, like it feels really scary to detach from that.
Yeah.
I notice so much resistance,
Yeah.
so much like it would feel like dying, which we obviously know like ego death and parts of us having to die, but it really, I wouldn't know who I am if I'm not feeling that.
Yeah. And that's already a part of the befriending process. It's listening to it.
I
And
feel nauseated now as well.
yeah, yeah. So you know, like there's intense energies happening here right now. This is not child's play what we are doing here. This is actually like real deep work. These parts are really fighting. And right now we are shining light on there. So they are getting exposed and that can feel really intense. And it must be like that. If it wasn't intense, these parts wouldn't, that's the energy that makes them, gives them the power, this intensity, this intense shame. So this is really good for Ashley to get in touch with the difficulty and the nausea that comes up right now. And in these situations, when there's nausea, we can take a moment to relax and slow down. So you can ask Ashley to take a deep breath into her belly and her chest and exhale, becoming aware that she is totally safe in her room with two very skillful facilitators being present here, and that she's in control how much she wants to go into this in this podcast. She can just do 5% or 10% if she wants to. She's in control.
Has a lot of energy like in my lower skull and around my jaw as well.
Yeah.
Like my whole neck is tensing up.
Yeah. Yes. So these are the somatics of the resistance now that we are looking at this more. And what we would do now in a session is, of course, like go slow and investigate these somatics. Um, what we are doing now in this demo process is we're going over to the last step, which is fears. So again, connecting to this part, Ashley, that hates the black hole and that is fearful in this moment and disgusted, maybe even connecting to the somatics of that. And then we can ask it, what are you afraid would happen if, for example, you would disconnect from that part, if you would unblend? You already spoke about death. Maybe there's something else coming up. What would happen if you would unblend?
It feels like if it would allow the vortex to continue without me keeping tabs on it, then it literally feels like it would kill me.
Yes.
It's almost like a hypochondria part. I know Jannick, you also have this as well. Like there's this part that's angry and disgusted is like if I let this tornado go loose, and I feel like my actual body would die. Which I mean, I have a lot of issues, topics with my body since many years, since 6, 7 years of chronic illness. And like not trusting when I get sick and things like this. So it's like I can have compassion for that part of like why it would feel this fear of wanting to protect this like physical body from an unknown like vortex of because you don't know what damage it can cause, like an actual tornado.
Yes. Yes. And this is the typical theme of what happens a lot in IFS is there's one thing that's way too dangerous to feel, the exile, the black hole in this case. And we feel like we would die if we would allow that fully. And that's actually how our system feels. And then there is a protector part that works with disgust and shame and hatred, and it protects the black hole. And that's kind of like protects the intensity of it, protects you from dying. This protector part things what Ashley just said,
Yeah.
protects you from dying. So of course it's here to protect you from dying because you don't want to die.
I definitely noticed a lot more lightness in my body just then, like something shifted a bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost more like a heartburn sensation now from my solar plexus all the way up.
Yes. Yes. And you used the word compassion last time when you spoke. So I can sense a little bit more compassion like coming into your system, and that will also change your somatics as well, because you're like, oh yeah, it makes sense that it would protect me from death.
Yeah.
And so, yes, what we would do next is, of course, investigate more into the protector part, making it feel more safe, being like, telling it also, you are in control. And we can even bargain with them. We can be like, how about you stay here the whole time? You don't have to go. You don't have to let go. Even you can keep your disgust and your hatred. And together we are going to look at 5% of the black hole, or maybe just the entrance, or maybe just tip our finger in there and then take it out again and see what happens. So there's a lot we can do here to create enough safety for Ashley's system to make the next step, make the next step, make the next steps. We don't dive fully into this. That's usually not what works well.
Yeah, you have to go gradual.
Exactly. You have to go gradual. And already just what's happening right now, even though it might not look like much, is so healing because we made something unconscious conscious. We're doing it all the time, like all these sensations, the sentences actually used, the back and forth, the conversations with these parts. All of that is connecting and shining light on the edges more and more and more and more and more, creating more safety, more space, more compassion for Ashley to feel these kind of things. So healing is happening right now in this moment in Ashley's system as we make the unconscious more conscious.
I noticed that I have a resonant feeling that it really just doesn't even feel like mine. Like it really feels like, and I get it. I just came from a training where a lot of like ancestral things were coming up, but this swirling tornado feels like so old and like really, really ancient and really, really dark and messy. And it like this part definitely doesn't want to go into it today, or like at least not on this call. I almost have the impulse that when I come off this podcast, I'm going to draw it and like draw a map of my body and literally draw like what's in there because that helps me a lot with the connecting to the body aspect.
Yes, yes, that is another wonderful thing you can do that Ashley is suggesting there is to draw your parts and see what comes up there, and it creates unblending and it creates also an exploring. It has an exploring character. You explore it more. And another thing that Ashley mentioned that might sound weird to some people is there are ancestral things sometimes that come up, things that you took over from your mom, from your grandparents, from your dad, whoever. That is a very common thing actually in IFS that this happens. So it might be that some part of it is not even hers. And it's another thing you can realize when you explore with curiosity and compassion these kind of parts. Okay, so for now we will have Ashley come back to us so she can kind of like, arrive back in the room. It's important to go slow because when you connect to these parts, you are in a different state of consciousness. It's more dreamy. It's not like this awake state of consciousness, like Tim mentioned earlier with a comparison to the dream state. So, yes, allowing herself to come back. And probably what I would do now, but Ashley knows how to do this, and we're going to end this podcast soon, is to do some resourcing, something that helps her ground in her body, makes her feel good. It can be some shaking, it can be some making some sounds, some grounding exercise, or like touching her body, massaging her body, whatever it is that makes her feel like more in her body again, because this was kind of like out here exploring. Yes, so welcome back, Ashley.
Thank you. I definitely also was crying a little bit then as well.
Yeah,
I was feeling the feeling.
feeling the feels.
Thank you,
And
Jannick.
thank you.
I would like to do that more with you. I feel
Yeah,
like
the
I'm
same
not,
same impulse. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not receiving enough sessions in comparison to how many I'm giving at the moment. Yeah, the
Yeah,
curse
it's important.
of the healers who overgive.
Yes,
And
and
don't.
we are so, and because we give so many sessions, we are so talented in also receiving them. It's so easy to receive session. We just need a little impulse here and there, and boom, things open up because we know the drill. So it's even like so efficient for us to receive sessions as well. We can get a lot go moving in just one session. Yeah.
Yeah. I need a drink of water, so I'm happy if we wrap up soon.
Yes.
or I need some space. Like you guys can keep talking.
Yes, take your space. And I think that is it. We introduced IFS and also the 6 Fs, just for kind of like for you guys, if you want to go deeper into that. After what I just did with Ashley, there'd be the unburdening process. So we'd try to get in contact with this exile, and we try to witness it and get this exile to show us more about what it is, that it feels. And imagery can come up, like Tim said earlier, of a basement, a cage, a cave, some kind of a prison, whatever it is, something like that happened to this child. Or sometimes they are locked in their childhood room or whatever, images like that. And we try to reparent it. So contacting it, witnessing it, then reparenting it, giving it the resources that it needs, that it needed and didn't get, allowing it to fully let everything out that it feels. I feel betrayed. I feel so angry. I want to say this to my dad. I want to say that to my mom, whatever it is. And then retrieval. Yeah, we're getting it out of this situation. We're getting them out of the basement, out of the prison, out of the childhood room, somewhere else, because it doesn't want to be locked there anymore, as a symbol. And then we unburden it. So after it was able to express everything, that's really important. Never do it before. It needs to be able to express everything, because otherwise this is premature forgiving, premature release, and this doesn't work. It will come back. We really need to make sure that everything was able to be expressed. And this happens so much in bypassing. It's like, yeah, I forgave my mom. You can't forgive her before expressing everything that needed to be expressed. It doesn't have to be towards her. It can be in a session. It can be with yourself. It can be in a room where you scream in a pillow, but it needs to happen. And then as a last step, the unburdening, like giving it away. It can be a ritual. It can be burning it. It can be digging a hole. It can be whatever feels good in that moment. And then the last part is integration. So that's what Tim mentioned earlier. What does this part want to do now? Does it still need anything from you? Does it want to do something else? And that kind of like you seeing that part doing something else now. Before, locked in a cave with this body language. Now playing joyfully with their bobby car or whatever it is. And it's kind of like the freeing process. Yes. And with that being said,
If
would
you have
you like?
questions about this, comment in the YouTube video in particular.
Yes.
We're being very active now and checking what you're all sharing. And yeah, let us know if this moved anything or if you tried this yourself and any
Yes.
parts that came up. Like we love imagery. Like tell us the weird, wacky scenes that came up when you did
Yeah, I'm
this.
so excited about that.
And also,
And
if you want us to talk about a specific topic that you might think would be interesting, let us know as well. You can leave a comment or just text us on Instagram, slide into our DMs.
Yeah.
yes,
And reach out
yes.
to us if you want sessions.
Exactly. If you want sessions, Ashley, Tim, and me, we are available for sessions. And you can get our contact in the show notes below
Yeah.
this podcast or video. Other than that, we love if you share this with a friend that you might think this is helpful for. If you comment, if you subscribe, you like this video. We appreciate that a lot. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
And we are so excited about this. A lot more to come. Pew, pew, pew.
Very snaps.
See you next time. Bye,
Goodbye.
guys.